The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
don't have them up.
Good morning, Bill. How are you?
Morning, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. So I just made you a presenter.
Okay, perfect. So you have the slides. I don't have to look for them, right? Or do I have the slides?
You have the slides.
Okay.
So right now
where
I'm looking at your screen.
Okay, so let me get there 1 second. Okay, so here's the slides again. Perfect. She made me a presenter.
Yes. And we have a few people on the line right now. They can't talk back to us, but they can hear us right now.
They can hear us. Okay, well, they can hear how untechnical I am.
Oh, no.
Okay, I got the slides going. Thanks. So right now, what can they see? The big slide or everything?
They can see everything. So they just
So
see
how do we
your browser.
How do we get rid of this other one? How do I get rid of this one to the side?
Let's go to present on the right-hand corner. There you go.
Gotcha. Okay, very good. Okay, yeah, this is where so, and when I want to leave this and go to something else, which is going to be like this, can you see this slide fine?
Yes, I can see it perfectly.
Okay, okay, great. Okay. I really am the least technical person, you know, but
no, you're doing great.
we'll figure out how to do this before they all get on. Okay. Got it. You can see that photo?
Yes.
Of the drainage ditch?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Okay, got it. Okay. Just practicing one more little bit here.
You're fine.
I need to keep this here, right? Because this is what we're really talking about. If I click out of this, we're gone, right?
No, because I have control of that, so you'll be fine.
So I can let this one go. I can get out of here. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, just trying to eliminate everything I don't really need here.
That's a smart move.
Okay. Okay. 9:50. Okay. Marty, where is Frank? When you see if you can get him when he gets here, I'm going to need help getting to the City of Houston website for permits in an hour. And I don't need it immediately, but. So is there another one today? Was the other one on the flood insurance program later today?
Yes, that one is going to be at 1 p.m. today.
That should be interesting. That
Yeah.
program just keeps changing. You know, it's very political. And so a number of changes were set for November of 2020. And of course, it's an election year and it doesn't matter, you know, what side you're on. You knew that was way too controversial. Everyone knew that was going to get delayed. So it's all been delayed one more year, which then means you're totally in limbo as to who the administration is. No, you know, because there's just no way of telling for sure what's going to happen. So if the administration changes, then the whole program changes again, which leaves everyone in total limbo. I mean,
Yep.
it's just a mess over there.
Especially with everything that is going on right now. It's just
Right. Well, yeah, and there's, you know, it's that program loses about 30 billion a year and has for the last 20 years. It keeps going up, but I mean, you just can't keep having a program that loses and loses and loses. You know, at some point, we're gonna have to pay for something over here.
right. Yeah, it should be very interesting.
Yeah. I just go into enough detail enough for them to call their insurance agent, you know?
Right, and not give out any legal advice or anything like that, because that's when
Right.
it's messy.
Right. Okay. I am still negotiating a contract at the moment, so that's a good thing. For $1.7 million, we're glad people want to buy houses today.
That it's very good. Yes. I was looking at an article on the New York Times, and they said that surprisingly, real estate in New York right now it's succeeding, which is so weird.
All of those people sitting at home, they have nothing better to do than
Right.
to buy, shelter in place and buy something is what I say.
I guess when you're in shelter in place, you realize you need a bigger place, so you need something
Sure,
different.
absolutely. Something healthier, something with a bigger balcony or a bigger yard, I'm sure.
Better view, especially New Year's.
Okay, 5 more minutes. How far was Frank?
We have 60 people sign up for that. Well,
Excellent. You know, it's many of my own agents sign up for it, but a number of people, you know, you have to take it a fair amount of times. It's just a very, you know, there's a lot of information. And so in the typical class that we have now, probably 10 or 15% of the people in the classes have taken it once before.
Wow.
Which is good. I mean, if you took it 6 months ago, you almost do need to take it again, because certainly, like even that flood insurance program, I mean, it moved a year, so that's, you know, I mean, that's a pretty big step or whatever. And a lot of the rules change, you know, frequently. So, and the money from the federal government comes down a little bit more. And so that changes what the programs are going to do to solve some of the problem. When I first did it, you know, the first year right after Harvey, it was all very depressing. At least there's some positive thing, you know, the bond issue, the state money, the additional money for mapping, money being released for the North Canal. Some of those things will, at least I can end on a positive note finally, you know. Before it was just all kind of doom and gloom.
Right. I'm glad some things have changed since Harvey.
Yes. Yes. And even the city kind of learned something. They learned some lessons that maybe initially were going to just be too restrictive, too catastrophic. So, And that's, I mean, I think that's good that they learned their lesson.
Yes.
So, but it does constantly change. Remember, I mean, the county judge changes, the commissioner's court changes. There's just the 8 new city council members. It all creates a certain amount of changes, you know, constantly. So you do have to keep up with it fairly regular. I'm glad I probably get 10 calls or emails a week from different agents across the city, or even a lot of them even in Galveston have, you know, not from my firm, but they've been to a class or heard something about the class and just have questions, which is good. I mean, that's the overall objective, was to, you know, get people educated. So.
Which is good. So
Yeah,
as people
absolutely.
are educated then.
Right. I mean, you'd be surprised. I mean, there's a lot of real estate agents. So, I mean, out of 40,000, you can imagine plenty of them don't have any concept whatsoever of these rules, you know, so the more you can get educated, the better.
There's a lot of people saying good morning.
Yeah, good.
They're very excited about it.
At home in their bathrobes and their, I did not take a shower today. I'm in my running clothes to go run after this, to be honest with you. But
that's good. At least you're keeping
yeah,
active. I can't tell you if I'm
yeah.
keeping active or not.
I
And we
make
have a few
myself,
people that are taking it twice now.
yeah. We're going to have another, you know, when I did this last time, it was the day of Imelda.
Oh, that's
Of the
right.
web.
Marilyn was telling me about it.
And I serve on a city emergency response and a county emergency response. And of course, even during that webinar, I was getting these texts and these emails. Of course, I'm getting them all this morning again from Reddy Harris, that they're expecting the same, you know, 3 to 5 inches of rain over a short period of time that could lead to street flooding, rising creeks and bayous. We're expecting this later today. Just so you know, it may be Armageddon every time I do this webinar. I'm not really sure, but they're.
Is this a plan, Bill? So people can take it?
Certainly, people do not get in your cars. I'll tell you when the rain's going to hit. It's not going to hit for a little bit, but we're going to get, there's definitely severe storms expected today.
I mean, the weather has not been pretty these last few weeks, which is ironic.
Yeah.
With everything going on.
Right.
Okay, so it is 10 a.m. We have 36 people online. It is up to you whether or not you would like to start right now or wait a few more minutes.
I think we can start. I'm good at starting right on time.
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna mute myself. For everybody hearing us right now, feel free to use the question tab on the right side of your webinar so that when Bill stops and asks if you guys have any questions, I can ask him those questions and then we can move through the webinar. But now I'm gonna mute myself, and Bill, thank you for being here.
Good morning, everyone. So glad that you could be here today. I'm very excited about sharing this information with you. If you've never had it before, it's a lot of information. For those of you that have been to one of my classes or been to the webinar before, thank you for coming back. There is new information. This is a constantly evolving topic water in our region. And so it is important that we know this information and stay up to date. I try and say in my classes, I'm just a real estate agent just like you. I don't work for any of these entities. I have no real position. I've just been amassing this information over the last decade or two, trying to be a great resource, not only for my agents and my clients, but for other real estate agents. And it's just truly my passion that every real estate agent understands all of this information and continue to be a resource for their clients. And if you ever need any information, please feel free to reach out to me. Like I say, much of this information changes from time to time as administrations change, as time goes by. After trial and error, a number of things do change, and it's constantly in flux. You will receive all of these slides, so anyone that we have your information, you'll get all of these slides and all of these websites. The class that we have is designed to be totally interactive, and it doesn't really work if it's just me talking. So please, if you have questions, we're going to go offline from the slides into a number of different websites throughout the course of the next 2 hours, and we'll send you all this information so that you'll have it. If you ask a question and I'm going to cover it, in the next 15 or 30 minutes in the future, we'll just say that. But there's no bad questions, and I'd rather just answer the questions on a particular topic before we move on to another one. So please feel free to reach out and give us your questions, and I'll stop and try and answer them the best that I can. So with that, this topic is really just about Houston, Harris County, the region, and water. We are going to have to learn to live with water. Houston and Harris County is an area that floods. It has always flooded. It's going to continue to flood. There's no way to stop the flooding. And so we're just going to have to learn to live with water in a region. And other cities and countries are learning how to do this. We're a little late to the game, but it is truly just about how we're going to live. We always flood, and we have flooded for a very long period of time. The Barker and Addicks reservoirs were designed in the late 1930s after downtown flooded numerous times. The issue is that most people in Houston, remember it's 674 square miles, just don't realize that it floods all the time. If you're not impacted, you don't really know about it. And it's basic street flooding that I'm talking about. Today will be a perfect example of that. We are going to have severe storms later this afternoon and early evening. We will experience, they're already telling us, 3 to 5 inches of rain in an hour. Our street grid system, which is designed to hold water, there's no way that the streets are not going to flood. They are the mechanism to hold water until it can get into the bayous and the storm sewer system. So there's never going to be any scenario that the streets don't hold water. They are designed to hold 1 inch of rain per hour. And the reality of it is we're getting greater intensity of rain in shorter periods of time than ever before. Many times you're going to hear me say today, I could care less if it's never flooded before. It has nothing to do with it's never flooded before because we've never had this type of climate issue in our life. So if your grandparents lived on a street and it never flooded before, doesn't mean it's not going to flood today because the intensity of the rain is greater than ever. There's more rain coming in a shorter period of time. And at the same time, of course, there have been development changes and patterns. So it's not just the water rising from your home, it's coming from north, south, east, and west. It can either flow through a property trying to get somewhere else, or it can back up because it has nowhere else to go. So of course, homes that have never flooded before are going to flood. Imelda is a perfect example. And we were talking earlier today, the last time I gave this webinar was the day of Imelda. So, we're expected to get these thunderstorms and severe storm later today. So I hope this is not a pattern. But Imelda, there were hundreds, if not thousands of houses in the region that flooded during Imelda that did not flood during Harvey. And it's just because the greater intensity of rain in the shorter period of time in that geographic area. If Imelda had moved over 5 miles to the west, you would have had hundreds of thousands of homes in the city and in the county that flooded. The reality of it was it dropped most of the water in the eastern, northeastern most portion of our county and then the surrounding counties, which were not densely occupied. But it rains all the time and floods on navigation, but you just don't know it. Or it floods on airline drive and you just don't know it because you're not on navigation or airline that day. But it does flood on a very regular basis. And the city and the county have been monitoring this flooding for a very long period of time. We know where it floods. We know what street floods on a regular basis, and I'll show you how this works. Seminar is not really designed to really focus too much on Harvey, except just to use it as an example. The best example I can say is if just Kingwood floods, no one in West Houston really cares. Or if just Meyerland floods in Tax Day, Memorial Day, and Harvey, no one in Kingwood and West Houston really cared that much. The event of Harvey was equitable distribution of pain and suffering. And because you got equitable distribution, you had people throughout the entire city and county that were willing to finally do something about it. So you had equitable participation in order to try and fix the issue that we have. So, kind of important to understand who does what with regards to water. Here on the top right-hand side, we start with FEMA. We know as FEMA is kind of the emergency management group that swoops in and helps, comes in immediately when there's a national disaster. And that's a little bit of what they do. And we were certainly grateful for their help during the Harvey. But for the grand scheme of things, they are constantly involved in the lives of Americans. The most important thing they do is manage the National Flood Insurance Program, which is basically flood insurance. And of course, in doing that, they manage the mapping of the flood plains. So they're the institute that's responsible for those sort of things. In regards to that, they set certain standards in order for us to qualify for certain things. An example I try and explain was during Harvey, if you want 90% reimbursement for picking up the debris, if you want any money, you must declare a curfew. It's not an option. As a consequence of getting the money, you must put in the curfew. We did not have mass hysteria during Harvey. And I represent and know hundreds of restaurateurs and waiters and bartenders and busboys and people who were impacted because we were forced as a city to implement the curfew, even though we didn't need it. And plenty of my friends were saying, beg the mayor to, take off the curfew. We needed the 90% reimbursement, and in order to get the reimbursement, you must put in the curfew. That's just an example of the overreach in which they have. And we'll discuss later today some of the changes that we have in the building code and in some of the rules are in order for the city to remain eligible, the city and the county, eligible for flood insurance program. If we don't meet their standards, they could deny coverage for anyone in Harris County. So you must meet certain regulations that they are imposing. It's not, some of these things we didn't really have a choice to. We wanted to continue to receive flood insurance and be eligible for the flood insurance program. And so that's really more about what they're doing. Of course, they're sending us the money as a result of Harvey, and we'll discuss how that works. Typically, an example of their deal also, if you took FEMA's money, you had to put it back exactly as it was. The criminal court building or anything, if you took the money, you put it back the way it was. Well, we knew as a city and as a region, if we took that money and we put it back exactly the way it was just going to flood again. Okay, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever to take $1 billion. The city of Houston, which is predominantly going to be my reference today. I don't think I mentioned that. I mean, I'm going to speak mostly about the city of Houston. There are some different rules for Bel Air and West University Place and the villages. And then we'll talk about the ETJ, the area outside of the city, and the difference between the city's rules and regulations and the counties. But I know most about the city, so that's going to be my reference point. The city did not want to, we lost $2 billion worth of City of Houston owned properties, libraries, multi-service centers, 8 sewage treatment plants where water was higher than the sewage treatment plant. And they were damaged. Some of them are still damaged and we've left them offline. Why would we want to take their money, redo the sewage treatment plant when we know it's likely to flood again? We want to move that sewage treatment plant out of harm's way, build it higher, protect the water sources that we have. And so we wanted to route our money outside of FEMA and over to HUD, Housing and Urban Development, where we could take the money and not put it back the way it was. And it's unprecedented that we were able to do that. We were fortunate that we already had a flood czar after the tax day floods and after the Memorial Day floods. We had been working on a number of these problems. It's not like we didn't know the city floods and where it was going to flood. Harvey gave us the money to solve some of these problems, honestly. So we routed our money and they had to rewrite the rules, and it has taken a longer amount of time in order so that we could redirect the money in a more common sense approach to addressing flooding in the region. But the reality of it is the federal government takes very long for anything. When this mayor took office, it was a little over 11 years after Ike, and we still had not spent all the Ike money on the blue tarps of the roofs of homes that had been damaged during Ike. And that was nothing to do with the previous administrations. It's just that is in general how long it takes. Almost 47 steps, and about half of those are audits in order to be able to expend the money in certain ways. In many ways, you have to spend the money first and get reimbursed. If you don't follow their rules, you're not going to get reimbursement. You have to have the money up front in order to spend it. So that's FEMA, and we'll come back to FEMA. The Army Corps of Engineers, which we read a lot about, they're in the news today because they're building those hospital beds in New York City and around the cities. We're preparing NRG Stadium today for 500 beds in the event that we need them. I'm not sure if we're going to need them or not, but the Corps does a number of things. But for this perspective, the main objective is that they own the Addicks and the Barker reservoirs. They were built with federal money. They were federally operated. They are federally operated. The county judge has no control over what happens at the Addicks and Barker reservoir. The mayor of Houston has no control whatsoever. They barely knew of the releases before anyone else did. Those were federal decisions made on federal property. And when it comes to redigging the reservoirs or adding it, those are federal decisions that are made at the federal level. They're not a county decision and they're not a city decision. We'll come back and discuss that a little bit more. The Corps does do work in the bayous. Historically, they were the ones that did the work. As you can imagine, we're in 2020 now, and the private sector actually does more and more of this work than ever before. So I would tell you that the Corps' work in the reservoirs is the least that it's ever been in the history of the city. So the private sector is actually doing more and more of that work today than just the Corps. What they own, they operate, and they do have contracts in the bayous, but they don't. The Harris County Flood Control District owns the bayous, not the Corps. The Corps owns the reservoirs, Addicks and Barker's reservoir. Harris County Flood Control District was designed, it is the state entity designed to address flooding in Harris County. And it was created after massive flooding in the 1930s, and their primary responsibility is to address flooding. And before events like Harvey and the thing, truly, the city's goal was to get it to the bayou, and the Harris County Flood Control District was to take it from the bayou and get it over to the Gulf of Mexico. All of the water in Harris County is going to go from the north and the west, and it is going to flow somehow to the Gulf of Mexico near the port of Houston. It's either going to flow over land, it's going to flow in a storm sewer pipe, it's going to flow in a bayou, but the water has to get there. And it is the natural flow of the watersheds, and we'll explain how the watersheds work. But their primary responsibility is flood control. And in many ways, the cities just said, oh, that's Harris County Flood Control District, we're not going to do anything about it. The reality of it is we're all in this together. The streets and how they're designed, the drainage systems, how it's designed, the building code, all is impacting flooding in our region. And so while the Flood Control District is primarily responsible really for the bayous, now that's the way we need to think about it. And they have, with the taxpayers' election through the bond election, the ability to do substantial work to address flooding predominantly along the bayous. But that's not the only way that we flood these days. We need to stop thinking about the bayous and the location of a bayou and how close I am to the bayou, because we have plenty of houses that flood on a regular basis that have nothing to do with water rising from a bayou, although certainly we have some that flood because of the bayou. Harris County is in the flood game because they have a building code that determines how high houses are. And of course, they build detention, they have green space, and they build roads. That's predominantly what they do, is a lot of roads. And there are drainage tied to every road. Remember, in our drainage system, you've got fresh water coming into a home, you've got sewer water going out from a home, but you've got storm sewer water. Everywhere in these streets, you've got, you know, a drain somewhere that water is going into. When you see these streets and you see the opening there, that water is going to the bayou. It's going into a pipe, but from the pipe, it's going someplace else. It's not going to some treatment plant. It's really going to the bayou with the leaves and the water bottles and the plastic bags and everything else. So we have to design. And if you pour a gallon of water in a quart jar, it has nowhere to go. If you put more water than the storm sewer system can handle, it has nowhere to do, nothing to do but just back up into the street and onto properties and sometimes into structures. So Harris County is definitely in the flooding game itself outside of Harris County Flood Control District. And then of course the cities themselves, the cities like West University Place, City of Houston, Bel Air, certainly are in the flood game. They have building codes, they have wastewater treatments, but they build streets. And when they build streets, they're drainage projects that impact the cities and how it works. So all of these entities, as well as Housing and Urban Development now and the state's General Land Office now, are in the flooding game and are impacting our region. So it's important to know who does what. And I have to say that notoriously for pointing the finger to everyone else, and you read about it a fair amount in the newspaper and everything, in reality, they have never worked better together. Everyone, it doesn't make any sense for the flood control district to do anything if it's not involving its partners in Harris County and the City of Houston, City of Bel Air, the Corps, TxDOT, everyone, the management districts, the TERSs, they're all in this game together. And there is a truly collaborative effort to really address this issue comprehensively. But it will take a long period of time. There are billions of dollars coming into our region as a result of Harvey, and you'll see here in this slide, it's where the money is going. Some is going truly just to recovery, and some is going to resiliency. Recovery is truly just rebuilding housing or paying for people to improve their structure, or it's going to truly the City of Houston's issues that were related to Harvey destruction, like City Hall, like the library, like things that flooded there. And then you've got basically another couple $1 billion that are going to projects, resiliency projects, helping us design our region so that it no longer floods in the future. Okay, so, and down below, I mean, that's GLO is General Land Office, and you've got a governor and you've got a land office and you've got people who are playing in this arena. But I'll be honest with you, I think they're playing pretty well together today. So the state had never really played in the flooding game for the most part, although they're understanding the importance of water. And I think it's kind of funny, you have a rainy day fund and we didn't use any of the rainy day fund. I swear to God, they really need to rename that thing altogether. But as a result of recent elections over the last year, the state did a number of things which are very helpful to the entire state and certainly to our region. And this is an example. They dedicated money for the first time really out of the rainy day fund to go address these issues if they happen in the future. If we had Harvey again today or tomorrow, you don't have to wait for the legislature to react to pull money from the rainy day fund. They pulled money, this $857 million, into a fund that can be used. There's no mechanism to replace that money. So at some point you need a dedicated funding source that will be a part of a rainy day fund to address issues like Harvey. But at least it is a start. And that money is more designed for the future than it is currently for projects that are going on now. The other money that you see around here is really being designed to address the issues as a result. One of the main deals here is the state is spending money for the first time ever to update risk assessment and risk mapping throughout the state. The majority of this money will come to the coastal regions, Galveston and Houston and surrounding counties there, to address areas that have never been mapped. And we really, I can't stress how important this money is today, next year, and the next year, because you'll see as programs change, one of the flaws of our system is that FEMA has not updated the maps quickly enough, okay? But there is a fair amount of other money that we're able to go get to throw at our problem. And this is regional money, so Fort Bend County, Montgomery County, we need, if we don't address Montgomery County and Fort Bend County, Montgomery County and Fort Bend County are just going to continue to flood Harris County. So we must take a regional approach when it comes over here to addressing flooding in our region. So that was excellent. And like I said, this was Proposition 8 voted on. It was voted overwhelmingly, and it will set aside some money for future scenarios. We have a fair amount of money going into housing. You can see, and this is City of Houston money. You can see over here, most of it's going to homeowners assistance, but of course some of it is going to rental units, and some is going to multifamily, and some very little money, very little money in reality is going to buyout programs. Buyouts are very controversial. The city has negligible amounts of money, I mean next to nothing, and the county has a little money, but all of these buyout programs truly still are voluntary. And we have 50 years of history that if you have a subdivision of 50 homes and you buy out 10 homes and you leave 40 that continue to flood, you really didn't do much. You didn't help the 40 people, and you didn't help the area improve drainage and infrastructure. If you're not buying out all 50 houses, lowering the deal, creating a true detention program, you really have done little amount of success. You've just helped maybe one individual out of millions. And so they're learning the best thing to do is to pull the money and address as regional areas large scale buyouts, but it takes everyone to agree, and you can imagine that that's a very difficult scenario to get through. And we're in real estate, we're into property rights. I'm not for taking people's property away from them, but at some point it's going to become economically more feasible. We have, and this, I don't want to sound editorial, but we have given people the incentive to take money and rebuild their home in an area that is highly risky, that we know is going to flood again. It's repetitive flooding. If I continue to give you money to rebuild into a home that floods 10, 12, 14 times over a 20 or 30 year period of time, it doesn't seem like I'm really making good use of the money or really helping you. Between your emotional and your financial and your physical health, it can't be good to continue to give people this incentive. So, and we have keeping flood insurance low, not requiring flood insurance in many areas, have given people this incentive to go build in high risk areas. And I think at some point, we've learned our lesson that perhaps we shouldn't be doing that, and it's really not good for them or good for society. The City of Houston is primarily in the drainage game as it relates to building structures and it relates to building roads. And as I mentioned before, I mean, we build these roads really to carry 1, maybe 2 inches of rain, and we know that we have significantly more of that. It would be virtually impossible to build the storm sewer system under the streets in order to carry 5 inches of rain in an hour. I mean, it's just not, it's not cost effective, and it's really never going to be a reality that we do that. What we'd like to do is at least get all the streets where we could at least carry the 1 to 2 inches of rain. And here again is Harris County Flood Control District, and you're seeing the fair number of things that they're able to do. If you're selling homes and you're not on a pretty regular basis going to Harris County Flood Control District and seeing what's going on in the region, you're really not doing yourself and your clients a favor. I got to give them credit. They're doing a pretty good job of making this as transparent and accountable as possible. And so if you just go to Harris County Flood Control District, and it's relatively easy to get to their homepage. You just Google Harris County Flood Control District. Then you can start to see a number of different scenarios that they have. They will show you the bond issues and where we have money being spent throughout the region. So if you're selling in a particular area in Cinco Ranch and you want to see some capital improvement projects, you can go and see them on a very regular basis. They update this. They designate the projects recovery or resiliency. So these are the ones that truly are the most important. This is problems we've identified throughout the county that we're actively doing something about. And you can see we're doing something throughout the entire region. But the beautiful thing about this deal, you can go to right here. It tells you exactly what's happening. It shows you the picture of exactly what's happening. Every time you can take these photos and forward them onto Harris County Flood Control District, and they will update these photos in real time. It's not like we're not fairly aware of what's going on all around the city. So you can, anywhere you go, just see potential problems that we've identified that we're slowly getting to, okay? So this map is just showing you issues that pop up that we know what's going on, any sort of thing. It can just be this crack right here, or it can be this erosion right here. This is identified and gets put onto a project for some sort of issue to be identified. So here we're identifying the areas. Here we're showing you the major projects. And like I say, you can go to this website and it's pretty good about showing you what's happening over here. So, and on this page, I mean, I was talking earlier today, I mean, we monitor the rainfall in these areas. So you can see where people live, we have monitors, and we're monitoring this for every minute. What is the rainfall happening today, 24 hours ago, 36 hours ago, 72 inches, 72 hours ago? We monitor this rain at any given moment to see what's happening, and they alert us based on different things to alert people in those areas. So the monitoring is pretty good at the county level and at the city level. Any city official could look at any moment and see if there is street flooding going on, or if the water is rising above the street and getting into structures. So it's a pretty good, and if you don't ever go to Transtar, it's another one just to kind of see what's going on, especially if you're getting on interstates. It's always interesting to see in a rainfall how much water is at North Main or 288 in Benz or any of those areas. But not going to get hung up there, but I do believe if I was selling a house, I'd want to know what's going on. This was the $2.5 billion bond issue that's being leveraged by another $2.5 billion of partners, either the state or the federal government, could be another entity, in order to get about $5 billion worth of projects done, what was slated to be over the next 10 years. What I think is important for all of us to understand is that this bond issue and these projects had been in the works for a very long period of time. This was the low-hanging fruit of the things that we could get done as quickly as possible. But it's very clear to everyone that this was just the beginning. In no way should we say this money is going to solve flooding in our region. It is the down payment that's beginning the process. We're in this football game and we're going from the 20-yard line to the 30-yard line, but we are far, far, far from solving the problem. And I just think we need to be honest with everyone about it. As taxpayers and as voters, are we going to hold them accountable to do the work that they said they were going to do? And are we watching them? I assure you, I am watching them to make sure that they are transparent, that they're accountable, that they're equitable. And then are we as a society, we as voters, going to be willing to pay additional money in order to solve our problem? I repeat all the time, if you have 10 holes in your boat and you only fill 4 of the holes, you are still sinking. you're still sinking until you fill all the holes. This bond issue is a step in the right direction. The federal money that we're talking about is a step in the right direction. So the continuation of things that we're doing at the city and county level are a step in the right direction, but they're just steps. I mean, you have to be realistic that we're not there yet. Before Harvey, and we're gonna get there, these are the watersheds, and this is showing you how the water works. No matter where you're here, all of this water is going to this direction over here towards Galveston Bay. It's got to get here somehow. Like I say, I mentioned, it's either going through another watershed, it's going through a bayou, it's going through the street, it's going under a house, it's going in a storm sewer, but we got to get this water in this direction somehow. So if I just work on Huntington Bayou, but I don't work on White Oak Bayou, I'm still going to inundate Huntington Bayou. So you need this comprehensive approach to everything. And this is the website that shows you how to go check, and there's the interactive map that I was just at that you will be able to see. So we knew before Harvey that we basically had an immediate $25 billion problem in Harris County, and in the region we had a $50 billion program that we needed. I mentioned $5 billion of the bond, $2.5 billion with the other $2.5 billion, $2 to $4 billion coming from the federal government, another billion coming from the state government, some other deals. We've got today around between 10 and $15 billion being thrown at flooding, which is great. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. The problem is we don't have $35 billion. And if you wait 10 years to go work on the $35 billion, is that going to be another $50 billion? It's supply and demand. In general, the Harris County Flood Control District 10 years ago or 5 years ago spent about $40 million a year in flood control. Today, they're spending about $400 million, which is a wonderful thing. I think that's great, but they're just inundated. If I took the average listing agent that had 8 listings and all of a sudden I gave you 800, you would not be able to address that deal. We do not have enough engineers. We don't have enough capacity. We can't do $1 billion a year because we don't have the resources to do $1 billion a year. And basic supply and demand comes into play. Every time you have increased demand, you have increased costs from the engineers, from the surveyors, from the contractors, from the concrete. So if you try and flood too much, the cost of your project goes up significantly, which means you can do fewer projects. So we're dealing with a few things. My main objective here is that we're starting to address flooding very well. We're on a great path, but we must keep up this path or we're not going to solve our problem. We're just getting started here. That was kind of the preview to our presentation today. When we start talking about the city of Houston, I want to be clear what we talk about. The city is in the city limits, although the city has extraterritorial jurisdiction beyond its city limits. And so when you look at a map like this, it shows you the city of Houston in yellow. So here's Kingwood up here, but it shows you where we have platting authority for subdivision. I serve on the Houston Planning Commission, and if they buy a tract of land over here at the western section of whatever, the Katy Prairie, yes, they bring it to the Planning Commission, and yes, we replat it. I don't know if that structure is going to be 16 feet up in the air or 6 feet up in the air or 1 foot above air. We're just setting the guidelines of the actual tract of land. We have no authority in the city of Houston to regulate how high this property is. That gets regulated by the county, which is less regulated than the city of Houston for sure. There's just no doubt that happens. In the city of Houston, there are of course more regulations here, but you can't blame me for platting 300 units right here because, like I say, they could be 16 feet up in the air and look like Galveston on Pirates Cove. I don't really know. That's up to someone else's jurisdiction. And we're required by law, if they meet the criteria, to plat them. If we don't like that, and there are plenty of people that don't like it, you must change the state law. Go to the legislature, go to the governor, lieutenant governor, and create a change. And I'm right there with you. I'm all for additional regulations, but I do have to follow the letter of the law with what it has right here. So we have very little authority from the Planning Commission about those subdivisions of lots here. Of course, the city has regulatory power through ordinances that the county does not have within the city of limits. So most of what I'm going to talk about today is regarding truly the city of limits. And you can see Westview's, you know, carved out of here, and Bel Air's carved out of here, and the villages are carved out of here. So here's Bel Air and all those sort of areas. They have similar rules. In many ways, their rules are better than ours because they're just a smaller entity. If we start looking down the path of the county and we use bad information, really, really, really bad information, 30% of all the geography, the land, 30% is in the 100-year floodplain today, and 7% is in the 500-year floodplain. That's 37% of all the geography. The dark blue is the 100, the light blue is the 500, basically. People talk all the time about not building in the floodplain, and I hear it, but I am a realist. If you didn't build in this today, 37% of geography, which I can tell you is really significantly larger than that. I mean, it would take you billions of dollars, which is more than we spend on all of trash and recycling and water, just to mow this piece of property. So to remove 37%, which is really 50%, off the tax basis, and to try and just mow it, I mean, it's next to impossible. The entire city of Bel Air is in a floodplain. The entire city of West University Place is in the floodplain. No one thinks West University Place is going to be bulldozed down and become a detention pond for Harris County. It's not realistic. West University Place doesn't flood because they're a wealthy city per capita, and they have spent more money than the city of Houston has, because they have 40 square miles versus 674 square miles to address flooding more readily than the city of Houston has. And so they're addressing flooding better at the city of West University Place and the city of Bel Air. So it's how we build into these areas that I think is probably the most important question. I 100% agree. There's some areas that we just shouldn't build in. I mean, but we really need to think of how we're going to build in these areas, especially when we add. In my opinion, we should think of the whole damn thing as the floodplain, okay? And you're going to see why I really think this way. But in any scenario, a significant larger portion of the area is going to be put into a floodplain relatively soon. If you look at Harvey, and I'm only just using it for reference because it's just an easy reference, 30,000 structures flooded in the 100-year floodplain, 28,000 structures flooded in the 500, which is 58,000, almost 59,000. But 90,000 structures flooded outside, which is just going to be part of my premise that more structures flood outside the floodplain than inside the floodplain, that the floodplains are not accurate. And the fact that you're not in the floodplain has no bearing whatsoever in my world of whether or not you're going to flood or not, okay? If we take out all of the reservoir release and all of the water that comes from Lake Houston and Lake Conroe over into Kingwood, just take out all that water altogether, it's statistically the same. 24,000 structures in the 100, 22,000 in the 500 equals 46, and 65,000 structures flooded outside the floodplain, outside of Kingwood, outside of Memorial and Frostwood, and those areas that were impacted by the release. Guys and girls, the floodplains are not accurate. They're not using accurate information. They haven't been mapped. The floodplain maps are stupid. It doesn't matter in the city of Houston if you're in the 100-year floodplain or not. I don't know how to make it any clearer than in every scenario, more and 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 more structures flood outside the floodplain than inside the floodplain. It has no bearing whatsoever today in my world. And we know how we got there. I mean, 79% of the city was built before we ever had one floodplain map. Remember subdivisions? There were no real maps until the 70s. You already had Meyerland. You already had Montrose. You already had Independence Heights. You had so many of these areas that were built out before. And only 40% of our pipes, only 40% today, are built to the minimum standard of the 1-inch, drain per, per hour. And only 1 out of 23 of the bayous even remotely meet the capacity using old outdated information. I mean, Of course we have more concrete. Of course, I show this slide all the time. If you were in the Katy Prairie, which is most of Houston, and you used to have a root system that was 10 feet deep, and you tear this out and you put in zoysia or St. Augustine grass with a root system of 1 or 2 inches, you've changed the dynamics of how water is going to flow through the region. It's why look, all these live oak trees are not native to Houston. We had palm trees, we had prairie grasses, we had wetlands. It's why we're putting back Memorial Park and the Arboretum and these areas along the North and South Canal as prairie lands that are designed to hold water. We need a place to hold all this water because we have to have greater capacity. So we're changing the topography every day in order to manipulate it. So we just need to come to the realization and know, and I believe, anyone with, who's studying this, realize every day that what we've got is broken. The maps are wrong, the maps are broken, we haven't mapped enough, and we keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. It's just not going to work that way. And we know this nationwide. I mean, and you're seeing it, and the stark reality of it is, we know the insurance program, the National Flood Insurance Program, doesn't work. And they have made it clear that they're going to throw out everything you know about the flood insurance program and rewrite it, okay? They're going to rework exactly how it's gonna work. And it's not gonna be based on the same way that it's been done before. A total overhaul of the flood insurance program, that's one thing, going on at the same time that you've got new maps coming in, okay? So you've got a couple of phenomenal all happening at the same time. And look, these guys are smart. We know Big Brother is watching you at every moment. They know exactly what houses flood and where they are. And they know that the majority, 75% of the FEMA claims are not in the 100 or the 500-year floodplain. Listen to me, 75% of the claims are not in the floodplain. Just follow the math a moment. The people who live here outside the floodplain pay the least amount of money to the flood insurance program, yet receive the greatest amount of insurance proceeds. Listen, the people paying the least get the most amount of money. The people paying the most amount of money have the fewest amount of claims. Doesn't seem to make any sense to me one way or another. There's no way you can continue to let these people who are not in the 100-year floodplain, 75% of the property owners not in the floodplain are claiming insurance proceeds at the greater rate than the people in the floodplain. It's broken, guys. It's broken, and it's been broken for a very long period of time. So the floodplain has very little to do with the insurance claims or the money or truly even the development. So yeah, I think we're going to build in the floodplains. I think most people think we're going to build in the floodplains. It's how we build in the floodplains and how we address flooding as a regional basis that really is going to matter here. They've been studying before Harvey 36,000 structures over the last 20 years that repeatedly flood. They flood, they get insurance money. They flood again, they get insurance money. They flood again, they get insurance money. They flood again, they get insurance money. And these homes have pulled out millions of dollars of insurance claims over 2 decades, and the homes themselves are worth mere pennies on the dollar. You've got $100,000 houses that have had $1 to $2 million worth of claims over the last 20 years. Doesn't seem to be a good use of federal money, tax dollar money, or even their money, guys. I mean, it just isn't a good use to continue to throw money at homes that we know are going to continue to flood. We've got to get them out of harm's way the quickest that we can. So same thing, 180,000 structures in the current floodplain. And at the same time, we know the floodplains aren't accurate. The basic cause of our problem today is that we're using old and outdated information. We're basing a certain amount of rainfall over 12 or 24 hours in order to calculate the old floodplain maps. So we're using 10 to 13 inches of rain, but they've done the study, and in reality, we're getting closer to 17 or 18 inches of rain. When you remap just using the old data, and you calculate 17 inches versus 10 inches, you can imagine that you're going to have more geographic area into the floodplain. Okay, floodplains are going to get larger. Okay, they're going to get significantly larger when you use, this is Atlas 14. This will be the data that will be used to calculate the new maps. But that's not the only way that we're going to use the map. So we look at data based on even Imelda here, where you're talking about, we will get, the city and the county will get money for Imelda. It was another federal emergency disaster, much like the pandemic has been. So there'll be some federal money coming for that, although we haven't gotten it. And you're seeing these rainfall patterns, things like Sandy in New York City impacting areas that have never happened before. Certainly coastal areas are, water's warming up, coming over here, shorter distance than ever before, dropping, greater intensity of rain than ever before, just going right back out here, warming up again and doing it over and over and over again. Greater intensity of rain, more rain than ever in a shorter period of time. And this is how the state will calculate using Atlas 14. But the new maps are not going to be out relatively soon. So what we've got today, you're selling a house today, it's in the 100-year floodplain, you think you're 2 feet above the base flood elevation, you've got a nominal amount for flood insurance, and very soon, this is what you really got. A house that's really 4 feet below the base flood elevation. So now you're below where you used to be above, and the insurance program is rewritten, and your fees are going to go up significantly. So and these are estimates, so don't take this to your insurance guy tomorrow and say, this is, Baldwin said my payment's going to be $9,500 a year. I'm just following what they say. People who are at higher risk are going to pay higher money. People who are at lower risk should pay lower money. So if you're in the 100-year floodplain and you're lower risk, you may pay less money. If you're not in the 100-year floodplain, but you're high risk, you're going to pay a whole hell of a lot more than you used to. You need to pay your fair share. So they've made it pretty clear. Similar to insurance. I mean, you've got to think of it. And when I'm in a room teaching, it's easy. This guy has 4 tickets. He's going to pay more than this guy who is the same age at the same address who doesn't have any tickets. The person in Harris County pays more than the person in Montgomery County, and because there's less people in Montgomery County. Women pay less than men. 18-year-olds pay more than 50-year-olds. People with a DWI pay more than the people without a DWI. I mean, there's a lot of basis to determine your level of risk, and we know what it is. And we know that across the nation, Texas has been subsidized by every other state. We pay among the lowest amount of premiums than any state in the nation for the exact same flood insurance. They have a lot of hurricanes in Rhode Island and South Dakota, and no, we've been subsidized. We have had very good success with very smart politicians named Bush and Cornyn and Cruz and others that have been very, very, very good, very effective at keeping our insurance cheap, which has kept people building in risky areas. Okay, I'm just saying, and the reality of it is, Texas probably is going to get the chance to pay more because they need to pay their fair share of risk, and that's just what they're telling us right and left. So these programs were announced earlier, and if you'd been to one of my classes last year, they were designed to announce the program in April of 2020 and come online November of 2020. I mentioned in all those classes, I thought that was unrealistic because it's an election year and no politician wants to deal with the fact that insurance programs are going to go up significantly across the nation. So automatically at the beginning of the year, they have gone ahead and delayed this sort of thing, moving everything 1 year. Okay, so they're moving the flood insurance that we discussed last year another year. Okay, which is, I suppose, good to give us more time and be realistic. I'm a realistic person. Hell, we don't know who the hell's going to be the administration or who's going to be in Congress or who's going to make the decision. So it could certainly never change, or it could change on November 2021 or not. These are political decisions that are just determined by someone above my pay grade. But I'm just telling you, if you Google it, that's what they tell you today. So we're going to map differently. And the beautiful thing is that Harris County is on the forefront of how we're going to map. We're going to map not just pouring 18 inches of rain into a bayou and seeing where it rises to see where your house is. There's a lot more factors than just the rainfall close to a bayou. What is the street system? Is there a curb and gutter? What is the drainage system underneath it? What is the topography in the greater mile or 5 miles? There's a number of factors that are going to determine your risk. And this information is all on the Harris County Flood Control District. It's called Map Next, and they're going to use a significant amount of new data. All of this information is going to go into determining your flood risk, not how close you are to the bayou, okay? That is barely a determining factor of whether or not you're going to be high risk or not, okay? You could be high risk and outside of the 100-year floodplain and still pay significantly more money. What we've got is going to be thrown out. It's antiquated, it's old, it's a beeper versus the Apple phone 10 or whatever. I mean, they totally need to be reevaluated and redone, and this is the process of how that we're going to get there to determine flood risk. At the same time, you're getting flood maps. They've got the data out of how these maps are going to work, and we're on this timeline. Of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so nothing ever happens early when the government's involved. So in any scenario, there's probably a delay versus this timeline, which was getting us these maps somewhere at the end of 2023 or 2024, probably. So you've got a flood insurance program starting here using an old map, and then you're going to get a new map somewhere over here, which is going to totally change everything also. So you've got a lot of things happening at the exact same time. So responsible cities, like the city of Houston and the county and other entities, are preparing for this. They're saying, let's don't let people build today 1 foot above the 100-year floodplain using 10 inches of rain for 12 hours. Let's go assume something else, that you're going to have greater rainfall and that we're going to need to be higher to get out of harm's way, especially because you have to be able to afford the insurance. If people can't afford insurance, it's going to be catastrophic to our industry. So you're preparing today for what is this inevitable situation over here. And I'm not defending the city or the county in any way. I think they're totally screwed up in lots of ways, but I do have to give them credit. At some point, you have to draw a line. The primary objective of a city should be the safety and security of its citizens. It's why you have a police department. It's why you have a fire department. It's why you have a building code. And so you're trying to get people out of harm's way. And I want to be clear, I didn't get to vote on this. This is extreme. They're not trying to design a house that will meet the standard today. They're making the assumption the intensity of the rainfall is going to increase over the next several decades, and that the housing stock we build in 2021, 22, 23 is going to be here 30, 40, and 50 years from now. So you're not building to today's standard, you're building higher than that to keep the housing stock out of harm's way. So yes, is this new building code 2 feet too high from Harvey? Yes, I mean, I don't think there's anyone trying to say otherwise. They weren't even trying to sugarcoat it. They're making the assumption that the intensity of rainfall is going to rise, and you're going to have more rainfall over a shorter period of time. At the same time, the population and the density of the region, both the city, the county, and the surrounding counties, is going to increase, which will reduce the amount of impervious cover, which will increase the speed by which rainfall has to travel from whatever watershed it is to get to the Gulf of Mexico. So you're making a number of assumptions in order to protect people for the future, which is really what they're supposed to do here. So, I mean, these are in the news all the time about insurance reform going on the same time you have mapping reform. We had about $900 million worth of insurance at the city, and we had a $2 billion claim over here. This is what this slide is telling you. And you saw from the other map that I was saying, they're perfectly honest about it. They're not even pretending otherwise. Half of Harris County has never been mapped. Half of the risk has never been assessed. 2,500 miles of roads, bayous, drainage ditches, old rivers have never been mapped in Harris County. And it's pretty damn evident because you can see that 60 to 75% of the structures that flood aren't in the floodplain. It's because we never mapped. We never mapped these areas. We never told people their level of risk. Guys, they're at risk outside of the floodplain, guys and gals. I'm not being discriminatory here. And we've let people build to too low a standard. We see this every day. These things were built 5 to 10 years ago or something. This drainage is designed to an outdated standard. So this house, built 1 foot above the 100-year floodplain today, is soon going to figure out when the floodplain's adjusted and they use 18 inches versus 12 inches, that it's soon going to be 3 feet below the base flood elevation. And I believe these things are totally at risk of flooding because, guys, you're pouring more water in this capacity than it can handle. When it has nowhere to go, it's going to go over that little ledge and right into those structures there because this capacity is not great enough to handle. It was designed using 10 inches of rain for 12 hours, not 18 inches of rain for 12 or 24 hours. So, I mean, these standards, I think we're going to look at some of these structures and say they were designed for a minimal standard that soon will be outdated. And these structures today may not need flood insurance. They may be built 1 foot above the 100-year floodplain as was required before September 1 of 2018, but they're not soon going to meet the standard when you get new maps or you get a new flood insurance program. Running low on juice here. So let's just kind of keep that in mind. How are we doing? Any questions so far, anything? Anyone
No
asleep?
questions so far that I can see here.
Okay, did everybody fall off and leave me, or is somebody still on the line?
No, we still have a lot of people on the line.
Okay, good answer. Okay, this is typical detention where something goes into a reservoir and it holds it there, and when it reaches this peak, then it goes into the storm sewer system and goes someplace else. This is at the bottom of the Addicks Reservoir throughout the city. You saw after Harvey that things happened, and so the county, I have to give them credit, were the first one to increase their standards. They increased initially their building standard, but then what they've more significantly done, even in the last 12 months, was they went ahead and adopted, for the county, this is just the county because it does get confusing. In the county, they treat the 100-year floodplain as the 25-year floodplain. They treat the 500 as the 100, okay? They've already done that by county. So they consider the 500 the 100. Now that is not accurate science, and I know plenty of engineers that explain to me that that's not gonna be the case when you get the new maps, but it's just an effort to protect people in the ETJ and in the county. They also significantly increased their threshold for detention and their minimum detention. So while we're talking about increasing the cost of building a particular home, you have certainly increased the cost of a subdivision and homes and I'm just making up the numbers now. You had 300 acres and you were going to use 30 acres for detention. Now you have to use 50 acres. You have less buildable space, which means the cost of each lot went up. This is in the county. And if you were going to have a 8-inch pipe and now you have to have a 16-inch pipe, a 16-foot pipe, of course the cost of that piping increased. So no doubt in the interim, the future cost of houses in the county has gone up. No doubt about it. But the main thing to remember, 100 is the 25, the 500 is already the 100 with regards to the county, how they look at things. So you have to look at the 100 and the 500. When we talk about those detention, instead of putting water into the storm sewer system, we need to do the opposite. So this was how New Orleans did it. They went equitably to every city council district, whatever they call them there, and they route the water from the street, instead of into the storm sewer system where it has nowhere to go, into subdivisions, into little pocket parks over there that are designed to hold the water. And my example in my class is say, take the corner of Buffalo Speedway and and Bissonnette, okay? That is not the most desirable spot to go put a home, okay? We should probably tear down that home, and I'm just kind of giving an example, and put a new pocket park, bird sanctuary, butterfly sanctuary, and push the water into this busy corner, which created a park for the neighborhood, but held the water. Things like this, we're going to have to hold the water in more and more places across the region, across the city and across the county and across the region. And an easy place is every soccer field or football field at every elementary, junior high, and high school needs to get lowered 6 feet, and we need to hold the water into those soccer fields and play soccer indoors when it's raining and hold the water so it doesn't get into the homes and the subdivisions. Across the city, across the county, we have to find more and more ways to hold water, to detain it in greater quantities than we've ever done it before, to slow down the spread of it getting someplace else so that it doesn't flow. Here's the reservoirs, and we see when they fill up, they're designed to overflow and go into the reservoirs. That's what they're designed to do. I, for all of my life, just assumed these were like the Dead Sea over there, and it was this big empty lake bed that was designed to hold all of this water. So I hired myself a little helicopter and I went over to the reservoirs. This is it, folks. It isn't an empty lake bed. It's full. The capacity, the amount of water that it can hold today is at an all-time low. It can only hold about 60% of what it could hold 40 years ago because of sediment, because of trees, because of grasses, because of all this stuff in there. Now, it doesn't take rocket science to say one of the things we could do easily is dredge this little sucker and let it hold millions more gallons of water before it's released over into these neighborhoods. But that is not a city decision. That's not a county decision. That's a federal decision. And the federal government doesn't react quickly. We talk about additional reservoirs, which I think should be constructed, but one of the easiest things to do is let's increase the capacity of the ones they already own. You don't have to buy any property to do that. For God love them, they're doing a study. It will take them 3 years to do the study because that's how the federal government rolls over here. And I'm a proud American, but it just seems odd to me that we can't speed up something that we know would make an immediate impact. These were built to protect this downtown over here. And of course, now we need to protect everything in the middle along the way. So continuing to apply pressure there to increase the capacity of the reservoirs. And I'm a tree hugger from the day one. If there are environmental issues, protect it. But if there's a little invasive species here, it wasn't there 40 years ago. We need to pick it back up and send it back to West Texas where it came from, because this silt and soil and stuff wasn't indicative of this area to begin with. So we've got to be realistic. At some point, we got to put people first and dredge these little suckers and get greater capacity. That's a significant game changer when it comes to helping these areas adjacent to the reservoirs. And of course, we see things like this. This greatly impacts the drainage ability of the city and the county. Anytime there's not a place to hold the water, this drainage ditch is designed to hold water. I mean, I know people don't all love this. This is exactly what this is supposed to do. Hold the water until it can get somewhere else so that it doesn't go into this home over here. And like I mentioned earlier, every time you have a magnolia leaf or a plastic bottle, that's less capacity in your storm sewer system. So we have a citywide adopt the drain program. I try and promote it so that realtors, homeowners associations, super neighborhoods will go and pledge to 4 or 5 times a year, go and rake, clean, and mulch before a storm the area adjacent to your particular storm sewer inlet. You can name it, Greenwood King Hurrah, or whatever your real estate company is. You can make it fun, you can blog about it. We have about 100,000 of these drains, and we've got about 1,000 of them adopted. So there's ample opportunity for people to go to Houston, adopt a drain, and try and address the issue. And of course, we're trying our best. Everywhere you see these little grates, you just see this thing drains to Galveston Bay. Anything that goes in it is going into the bayou, it's going into the storm sewer system, it's going to Galveston Bay. I mean, that's when the trash goes there, that's where it's going, guys. There's very little ability to restrict it and collect the stuff before it gets there. So the street is really, dealing with open ditches, dealing with culverts, dealing with the pipes underneath the streets are one of the main ways the city is going to, and the county is going to be able to address our storm sewer requirements. And then reminding people constantly, I don't know how else to say it, the streets are never not going to flood. The streets are designed to hold water. If you are in a 5-inch rain this afternoon and you're on Washington Avenue is going to fill up with 18 inches of water. That's what it did on the July 4th flood, because you know what? The water is draining from Patterson and Cornish and Malone and Birdsall to Washington Avenue so that it can get into the storm sewer, so that it get into Buffalo Bayou. That's how it's designed. So we just need to tell people of their risk. You know who doesn't want you to know this is the car dealerships. We had 500,000 cars during Harvey that were underwater. We had 10,000 cars in Imelda, or whatever. Most of them were not really in Harris County. Many of them were in the adjoining county, but we've got to tell people of the risk. Streets are designed to hold water. They're never not going to be designed to hold water. We've always regulated in the city of Houston the 100-year floodplain. It's in the Floodplain Management Office. FMO is the entity that's regulated. And I want to be clear, we didn't do a very good job of it. I'm not defending them. What we did before was not adequate. And after Harvey, after the equitable distribution of pain, I think there was a realization that we just need to take responsibility and say, never again. Let's draw a line. Let's say there's some point in time of which we're not going to allow the insanity to continue. And the real date of that for the city of Houston is September 1 of 2018. It's when new guidelines went into play. Everything else was grandfathered. All of the work during Harvey was really grandfathered. Not much we can do about that sort of thing, not making an excuse, but we've got to say, never again are we going to let this happen. So now the Floodplain Management Office is regulating every area in the 100-year floodplain and to some degree the 500-year floodplain. We put an extra layer of protection in that geography. Although I want to be clear, that's not our biggest problem. More structures flood outside the floodplain than inside the floodplain. So this was just the easiest thing to do. The easiest thing that kept FEMA happy to keep flood insurance affordable, at least in the short term, in order to keep us eligible for the flood insurance program. And of course, to get people out of harm's way the best way that we can. And the overall objective is to keep people safe and to keep people from spending money into a structure that we know has a high probability of flooding. And I don't want to be insensitive. I believe hundreds of thousands of people are going to be financially hurt as a result of some of these rules and the changes that are soon coming, whether that's the flood insurance program, whether that's a new map, or whether that's a building code that impacts them in the 100-year floodplain, the 500-year floodplain, and outside the floodplain. Everyone is going to be impacted. The goal of the city is to get every structure out of harm's way as quickly as we possibly can. And I want to be clear, many, many, many people are going to be harmed financially as a result of this. It's just a function of time, really. Permitting is how we're going to do a fair number of these things. In our industry, we're pretty well apt to know what we need a permit for, although I'm surprised how many people either take advantage of it or just pretend like they don't know. But of course, you know, if you have a plumber that's doing something, you need a permit. You need a permit to replace the water heater. You need a permit to replace the sink in the island with the new countertop. You need a permit to, you know, put in new electrical GFCIs in the countertop when you're replacing the backsplash. You know, plumbing, electrical, HVAC. You need a permit to replace the air conditioning unit. But I'm a realist, and the city's realistic. AC goes out on Friday afternoon. You call ABC Air Conditioning. They say it's $8,000 worth of permit or $7,500 without a permit. If I have to get a permit, we have to wait till Monday. You're hot on Friday. You say, screw it, or they just don't even tell you. Some of them don't even tell you, and you go and replace it without a permit. And I get it, and I'm not here to judge one way or the other. I'm just telling you what the rule is. The design of the permit is to keep people safe and to make sure the AC company didn't screw you over. But you need a permit to re-roof a house, replace a door, replace a window, replace siding more than 128 square feet, which is about one side of a garage. It's not that much to get to 128 square feet. If you're replacing a little hail damage, it's fine, but you get more than 100 square feet of a roof, you need a permit for that. You need to be inspected for that sort of thing. Even though I'm a realist, people don't do it, but doesn't mean that it's not a rule for it. People speed, and that's not the rule either, but I'm not here to judge. Here's how Chapter 19 greatly impacts every one of our properties today, especially in the current 100-year floodplain, but the city's regulating in the 500-year floodplain, okay? We've never regulated in the 500 before. And there'll be changes outside the 100 and 500, I want to be clear, but the most stringent ones are in the 100-year floodplain. And we see the new standard where it used to be new construction, 100-year base flood elevation plus 1 foot. Now it's 500-year plus 2 feet. The difference of that in general across the city is about 3.5 feet, okay? If I took City Hall, the difference is 6.5 feet in downtown Houston. So it's, and you can see this, of course, most evident where we see it is in Meyerland. You drive down Braeswood, north or south, and you see these structures, ranch style homes that are significantly higher. I will tell you that those houses could have been at 5 or 6 feet. And of course, they determine, the homeowners and architects, that you can't use that space as well. And sometimes they go significantly higher, 10, 12, 14 feet, because now they can park their car underneath there or use that for storage or the bicycles or something. So many of the structures that you're seeing in Braeswood or those areas maybe are higher than they were required to be because that was the most functional use of their land, and I get that. But in any scenario, the new one is significantly higher for new structures, certainly in the 100-year floodplain, and follow to the right in the 500-year floodplain. It also applies to that. So you're building to this standard here because the assumption is that soon what is the 500-year floodplain will be the 100-year floodplain. Okay, so we're just automatic. Now, when the new maps come out, all the new regulations come into play, whether that's 2022, 2023, 2024, who really knows? The city is committed to reevaluate this, and maybe you will no longer be at 500 because you'll just use the standard back over the 100. So they've agreed that we'll reevaluate when the new maps come out. The maps aren't coming out anytime soon. These changes all the time, so I want to be clear, city council meets on a weekly basis and rules change all the time and they're subject to change. So today, you can add your 1/3 square footage addition. You have 1,000 square foot bungalow and you're adding 250 square feet. We're going to let you add that addition today at the old standard. So 100-year plus 1. This is stupid. I don't understand why we're going to let someone build 250 square feet that we know is going to flood. If we knew it wasn't going to flood, then why would we make someone go over here? So it's just a matter of time before these new additions flood that this will go away, because this doesn't make any sense to me. Because if you build your 1,000 square foot bungalow and you build 500 square feet, we make you build to 500 plus 2, which you can see this easily go down TC Jester. You see your ranch style bungalow, you see your new master bedroom, bath, and closet, which is up 5 feet in the air. The reality of it is, we rescued people in the boats in their master bedroom bath because that didn't flood and the old house did flood. And we proved time and time again that this is actually a pretty safe level for people to go and get to in the event you have an event similar to Harvey. So additions greater than 1/3 in the 100-year and in the 500-year, you're going to be at this new standard. Of course, what you're seeing is they want this to be the new standard. I mean, you want this to be the new standard. What people do not understand in our world, real estate, is that if you had an event similar to Harvey, but any event, you do an improvement, something greater than 50% of the value of the home's value on HCAD. You have a $400,000 house in Westbury, $300,000 is the land, $100,000 is the improvement, and you go to do a $50,000 improvement, you must raise the entire structure, the old part, as well as before you can remodel your kitchen and put in a new driveway and a garage, which might be $51,000. You can't get a permit to do that until you raise that structure out of harm's way. It's our attempt to keep you from spending a whole lot of money on a structure that we're pretty sure is going to flood, okay? We know, I will show you 149,000 structures we let remodel and build that we believe would have flooded again in another event. So we let you do this in the past, but we're not letting you do this in the future in the city of Houston. What's more important, and I want to make sure that you understand this, there might be some questions. If you're sitting there today and you bought a remodeled house that was remodeled after Harvey and a tree falls on it in the storm today, and the tree does 50% of, and with the rainfall coming into the roof and into the kitchen, you have 50% of damage. You cannot get a permit to remodel that house until you move that house up to 500 years plus 2. If you have substantial improvement or substantial damage, which can be a lightning strike, can be a fire in the kitchen, can be a tree falling on it. It doesn't take much to get to this substantial damage or substantial improvement, that you're going to have to get these structures, especially in the 100-year floodplain today, although it soon may be in the 500-year floodplain, out of harm's way, okay? This is not explained enough to people, especially the ones that bought a remodeled house in the 100-year floodplain. When it happens again and they get 4 feet of water on their 1-story ranch style bungalow or home, they're not going to be able to remodel as they did before. The goal is to keep people from applying money, insurance money, their own money, a loan, anything into a house that we believe is going to flood. The attempt is to get them out of harm's way, which raising these ranch style houses is $250,000 and the house is only worth $100,000. I'm a realist. You're going to bulldoze that house down and you're going to rebuild this version up here, and it's going to be out of harm's way for the next 100 years. Many people are going to be hurt here. They're going to be hurt here because they're buying a house that's not in the 100-year floodplain, that's soon going to be in the 100-year floodplain, and this will apply. Or they bought a house that's going to have some sort of damage, or they're going to want some other additional improvement. There is a database that the city must use to say what an improvement is. An improvement is a sidewalk, a driveway, a new roof. You can't go and say you're remodeling your kitchen and say it's $5,000. There's a standard dollar amount for an air conditioning unit, a roof, a new garage, and all those things apply to the substantial improvement or the substantial damage. So this is going to get a fair amount of people, and it is going, if you had an event like Harvey, and I don't think we're going to have an event like Harvey. I don't, and most people don't think we're going to have an event like Harvey. I'm not worried about Harvey. You have Imelda again. You have 5 inches today, where it pours heavily in Timber Grove or Shady Acres or Independence Heights or any number of little areas. It doesn't have to, it can be in Cherryhurst, it can be anywhere, and you're going to get some of these structures that are low, that it's going to catch them in this deal. Now, today you have to be in the 100-year floodplain. I mean, I get it, not everything's in the 100-year floodplain, but if the city adopted the same as the county next Wednesday, that's 500, you picked up another significant amount of structures. And if they then go and adopt a deal outside the floodplain, I mean, based on substantial damage, if you flooded prior in the last 20 years, the rules change all the time. I'm not trying to be a fear monger. I'm just trying to say the overall objective of the city is to get structures out of harm's way at your own expense. The city provides very little money to do this, and many people are going to be impacted by it. So you really need to know that if you think you're here and you're really over here, you're going to need to prepare for that. Please don't go sell a house today and someone's in the 100-year floodplain +1 and tell them you have nothing to worry about. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Please don't tell them if they're in the 500-year floodplain, they don't have anything to worry about. Please tell everyone they have something to worry about. Everyone is at risk. and everyone needs to prepare for changes in the flood insurance program and for flooding. We just want to ensure that houses are out of harm's way, okay? So making sure you understand substantial damage and substantial improvement and that you're understanding that. And of course, understanding where you can find, this is a typical HCAD deal with some little house in Timber Grove, you know, don't count the land, it's only the improved value there that's going to make any difference when you go and do this. And we have a hold on your house in the 100-year floodplain and the 500-year floodplain already. You can't go get a permit in those areas for anything without the floodplain management office going and checking a little box. You go get a permit for an air conditioning today on this house and it's $6,000, they're going to let you do it, but they're going to check a little box and they're going to say you spent $6,000 on an air conditioner, and they're going to keep a little tab on that sort of thing for that period of time. And so I want to be clear, they've created an extra layer of confusion in the 100-year and 500-year floodplain that wasn't there before September 1 of 2018. If you're used to historic districts, same thing, to just re-roof your house in the 800 block of Harvard, there's a hold on your house. You got to have somebody from historic check a box that say it's okay for you to replace your roof, and you can replace it so long as it's the exact same roof. You want to go from composition shingles to a metal roof, oh no, you got to have somebody else go and approve that sort of thing. So we've created a layer of bureaucracy to shepherd us through the 100-year and 500-year floodplain. This is the permits after Harvey, as I mentioned, 30,000 in the floodplain. I mean, these are the structures that flooded, 30,000, 500, 58,000. And of those, we had 5,202 permits and we had 1,900 permits final. It's just a fact that this number is only a fact. I will tell you that we turned our blind eye and let people hurriedly get back into homes, and it put them in harm's way, many of which are living in molded houses or had unscrupulous work done to them. And I think it's irresponsible and immoral, and I don't think we're going to do that same thing again. The county, before the city, made changes to their building code. They already had gone in the 100-year floodplain, they had gone to 24 inches, and the 500-year floodplain, they had gone to 24 inches. Remember today, I mean, they made this effective January 1, and later in 2019, they adopted the 500 as the 100. So anything that's in the 500 now must meet the 100-year set of rules. They treat the 500 as the 100 and the 100 as the 25. So they only peer and beam construction on these sort of things because there's no net fill in the grand scheme of things. Now this is in the 100 and the 500. So it is selectively about where you could get fill, no net fill, which is bringing in dirt and raising your foundation. The city has the same scenario in the 100 and the 500-year floodplain. The reality of it is in the county, you get very little single houses being built. Someone buying, it's a 500-acre tract of land that's being developed. They can move their dirt around enough to create their detention, raise their properties out of harm's way. They raise them 500 plus 2 today just fine, creating detention ponds, and they're able to build slab houses. But the average person building a house in the county is really barely able to build a pier and beam house. The rules are pretty tough, and where they just don't make sense, we have an appeals process in the City of Houston. Mike Dishberger from the Greater Houston Builders Association, Sandcastle Homes is on that appeals board. There's some common sense people. If it just doesn't, you know, the new rule is 10 feet in the air, and at Harvey it only went to 2 feet, and you want to build it 4 feet, those sort of things. They do make some exceptions. There's no way one rule fits everywhere, but I mean, they do want to keep you out of harm's way. There have been very few appeals, I'll be honest with you. So the most important thing from this segment is that you've got to be able to find, I only care about the 500-year base flood elevation throughout the county. Nothing else matters. Forget the 100-year base flood elevation. That is to determine flood insurance today that's soon going to be obsolete. If you don't know the 500-year base flood elevation, then you are doing yourself and your clients a disservice. And you can find the 500-year base flood elevation of any piece of property, land, or home in the world, okay? Don't let a survey or someone tell you they can't find the 500-year base flood elevation not in the 500-year floodplain. Bullshit. You can find it in Iowa. You can find it in Illinois. You can find it in Tulsa. You can find it in Cinco Ranch. You can find it in the Lakes of Eldridge. You can find it in the Heights. There is a 500-year base flood elevation for every piece of property. So you need to know what the 500-year base flood elevation is of the property, and then you need to know how the house is. If the house is at 500-year base flood elevation and greater than 2, that house is going to be great. It is going to be out of the floodplain. It's going to be the lowest risk. It's going to be, its insurance is going to be affordable, no matter if it's in the 100 or in the 500 or outside the flood 100. You need to know what the 500-year base flood elevation for every property. The best way to go and find that today, and it's not easy, I want to be clear, these things are just not easy, but we have found a way for you to find in the 100 and 500 floodplain. I only have this information in the 100 and 500, the difference between the two. So we've got this website, Walter P. Moore, and you can create a free account at flood.walterpmoore.com. We're going to send you this email of how you can do it. It's a free account where we have monitored the difference between the 100 and 500. This, I don't have any idea where the house is. You still need an elevation certificate for that, but I can tell you the difference between the 100, because what this is telling me, when the new maps are done and they use 18 inches versus 10 or 12 inches, it's giving me a pretty good indication of where the new 100 is going to be. Not 100% perfect, but it's a pretty good idea, and then where I'm going to need to build. So I am building a home for myself at 2714 Morrison in the Heights, okay? So let's just follow this little train. 2714 Morrison is in the current 500-year floodplain. Here's the bayou. Let's be clear. I want to be real clear about these maps. Red is floodway. Floodway is bad. Don't know how to make it clear that things that are in the floodway over the next 10 years are going to be reclaimed by eminent domain and going to get out. I mean, you can't have water in the floodway. We have these 100,000 impediments into the floodway in the county, and we are slowly notifying people, about 4,000 a month. You've got something in the floodway that's on your property. If you want it, get it out of the floodway, or we're going to remove it. 90% of this is a fence or a deck or something. It's not typically a house or a garage, but there certainly are houses and garages that are in the floodway that will be reclaimed. The floodway is for water. It's for nothing else. It's no fences. It's no decks. It's no boat docks. It's no structures. I don't know how to make it clear. Red is bad, okay? Blue is the 100. Green is the 500. So the assumption, general assumption, is that my home, that site, will soon be in the 100-year floodplain. When they get me a new map here, and I'm going to end my program with something positive. I know it sounds kind of negative, but there's a lot of positive things. And we have certainly, maps change all the time. That's why you must allocate the money to remap. When we spend $20 billion of projects, you are going to remove houses from the floodway. You're going to reduce the 100-year floodplain. You're going to reduce the 500-year floodplain. You're going to get houses that were not in the floodplain that were flooding, not at risk. But we're not there today. And we're not going to be there tomorrow, and we're not going to be there in 2023. I'm not sure we're going to be there in 2024, but I will explain a number of projects that I think are very positive. But I'm going to build a house right here in the floodplain. It doesn't bother me, okay? Now, here, if I click on these little dots, it tells me, this is the most important thing, the 100-year floodplain today, using the current maps, which are outdated, so we're not, the city doesn't, I could have built August of 2018 at 38 feet, 38.14 plus 1. So I could have built basically at 39 feet and a little change, okay? Today, if I want to build a structure there, I'm gonna have to build 2 feet above this number. So now I gotta build at 44.8. A clear difference of 5, almost 6 feet higher today than I would have built 2 years ago. Any new structure on this tract of land is going to be that much higher than it used to be. Okay? And I'm going to build my structure about it. You know how many houses I know that have flooded right over in this area? I sold these little suckers right here on Wrightwood that are built up 10 feet in the air, but there's 10 feet of water. I have been to this stop sign during Harvey, during Allison, during Tax Day, Memorial Day, where this stop sign is underwater, and this fuel depot is always underwater. I'm not going to be at risk. I'm going to build it at 45, you know, significantly higher than I used to be. That's what this is telling me. So if I come right here to a house and I see a house and it is at 39 and a half, and I say, oh, you're at 39 and a half, you're 1 foot above the base flood elevation, you're the lowest insurance rate in the floodplain, your flood insurance is only $500. You could say that today. Today, that's probably a true statement. But you get a new map with Atlas 14, and that sucker's soon going to be 4 feet below the base flood elevation, and you no longer have grandfathering, and the insurance rates go up. What is $500 in insurance could be $10,000 worth of insurance. Do not go and quote me in an hour or whenever this next seminar is that Baldwin said insurance is going to $10,000 a house. I didn't say that. They've said people are going to pay appropriate to their risk. And houses that are lower are going to pay more, and houses that are higher are going to pay less, whether they're in the floodplain or not in the floodplain. It just makes common sense. If you do work in any of these 100-year, 500-year floodplain, you get an air conditioner, you re-roof, you redo your driveway. Floodplain management is looking at these activity in these areas. FMO is going to have to approve the work that's done, so it is a delay. You can replace the driveway, you can replace an air conditioner. I'm just telling you, to get those permits take longer today than they used to. So everyone that's buying a house, but this guy over here buying a house should want to know what is base flood elevation. What if with the new maps, these are the 100-year floodplain? We don't know. This could be in the 100-year floodplain because the street is lower and the drainage is insignificant. Has nothing to do with the bayou. It can't just be the bayou anymore because we know 75% of the structures are not close to the bayou. It doesn't make any sense just to use the bayou. So Walter P. Moore will, you just plug in the address. Now, if it's not in the 100 or 500-year floodplain, we don't have these mapped. Does anyone have an example of a house they'd like for me to look at just for you to chart? You just put in the address, and you can figure out anything that's in the 100 or 500-year floodplain in the city or the county. I don't have Fort Bend County, I don't have Montgomery County, don't have Galveston County. Anyone have any address they want to pop this right quick?
Someone did have a question about the gray area. What does that represent?
Today, that gray area like here, these areas are outside the 100 and 500-year floodplain today. Is that what the question is right here?
Yes.
The gray lines are where we have gridded the difference between the 100 and 500-year floodplain. But this section today is outside the 100 and 500. Doesn't mean that it's always going to be outside the 100 or 500. But this is showing red floodway, blue 100-year, green 500. Okay.
Perfect.
So
you have
these areas of Shady Acres, I mean, I am very nervous about these areas and Shady Acres that have all been built up. I believe they're too low. I think their flood insurance is going to rise significantly. You can see all of Independence Heights here, probably. I mean, it's just the impediment of 610 and I-45 has created a lake into this section and will not be rectified over the next 10 years. It'll take longer than that. But you can go to Walter P. Moore and you can put in any address and you can kind of figure out this information. It's a pretty good, fun way to go and look there. If there's no other addresses, we'll keep going here. So we'll send you this deal. Like I say, it's a free link for you to check this out, and it kind of tells you how to do it. It's telling you the difference between the 100 and the 500. The city has a tool also. Anything that the government does is complicated, so we give you the website, but it's extremely complicated. I wouldn't, you know, I would just go to Walter P. Moore because it's just much easier to figure out than the city. This is one of the reasons we put in HAR Notice 303 is that the city and the county are regulating now in the 100 and 500-year floodplain, which are subject to change over time because things change all over time. You are subject to new rules and regulations. Your finished floor height will need to be 2 feet above the 500-year floodplain. The 500-year floodplain is impacting your property. If you want to know these rules, it impacts you not only if you build, but if you remodel. So, I mean, I would have every buyer, doesn't matter where you are, sign this form if they're in Harris County or the city of Houston. Everyone should fill out this form and understand the risk, and let them go to some of these websites if they have additional questions. Of course, the seller's disclosure has changed. We've seen these changes. It's asking way more questions. I don't think there's been major complication with this sort of thing. I think it's been good that we've asked these sort of questions. Ignorance, I mean, I don't want to go there. I mean, but people need to pay attention. I will be clear, because nobody actually ever understands. If they're in the conservation district, everyone in the city of Houston and Harris County is a conservation district, and so but no one gets that question right. It doesn't matter to anyone that you're in the conservation district, but it is. These are these areas that, of course, were the most impacted by the new seller's disclosure. These were areas behind the Barker Reservoir on the other side. You're talking about thousands of houses that were in the flood pool. All of this canyon gate is in the flood pool. Now, the houses could be high. I don't know if they're 16 feet up in the air or not, but they were built in an area that were designed to hold water when the reservoir got full. I mean, nobody notified them of these sort of things, but these houses are all in the reservoir and they're all subject to certain things. So you need an elevation certificate for almost every house in Harris County. And you need on the survey that you should get now when you're selling a house, the list of where you are in the 500-year base flood elevation. So on every survey, in the 100-year floodplain, in the 500-year floodplain, not in the floodplain, I would mark what the 500-year base flood elevation is. Because if you go to do work in the 100-year or 500-year floodplain in the future, you're going to need this number to send to the city of Houston in the permitting office. It's free to get this number today on a surveyor. There is no surveyor that cannot put the 500-year base flood elevation on every property in Harris County. It doesn't cost anything. On every survey, have them marked today, because no matter where that structure is today, this was Grant Harpold from HAR's legal advisor. He tore this down and had to build a new house, and instead of building at 49.5 plus 1, he had to build at 52 plus 2. You have to know this number, guys and girls. You have to know this number. In the future, you're going to need to know this number. On every survey, mark the 500-year base flood elevation. And I would get an elevation certificate for every property, that it's just because I think every property is subject to flooding. I personally believe every property is subject to flooding. It's a really simple rule, though, in my game. Stand in the middle of the street. And if you're in the middle of the street looking at a house and you're looking up significantly, you're good. And if you're looking level or down at a structure, you're bad. Okay, no matter where it is, forget the 100 or the 500-year floodplain. More structures flood outside the floodplain. So don't know how to make it any clearer. Get the 500-year base flood elevation marked on a survey. Cost nothing. Certainly cost a lot more later. If 3 years from now they go to do work and they're now in the 100 or 500-year floodplain and they don't have this number, it's going to cost them a lot of money. And then go get the elevation certificate. So today, same thing. I'm selling that house we were just talking about, and I go and I get it, and I get this elevation, and it tells me this base flood elevation is 626. Keep in mind, this is using the old flood map with the old data. They haven't adopted the new data. So today, you get this house, and it's 626, which says, oh yeah, your house is at 627, you're 1 foot above the base flood elevation. If that house floods, you can't remodel this house. You must build to the new 500-year base flood elevation, which is going to be significantly higher than this, plus 2. So today, you're selling a house in Houston, Texas, and you're telling this person, you're safe, you're at the minimum flood insurance rate. And that's using 10 inches of rain for 12 hours, and you go calculate 17 inches of rain over 12 hours, that little Jules base flood elevation is going up, and they're going to be below the base flood elevation, and then soon they're going to pay higher insurance. You need to know the 500-year base flood elevation, and you need to know the elevation of the structure. I don't know how to make it any clearer. I make it as clear as I possibly can. You need the 500-year base flood elevation, and you need an elevation certificate for most structures, which if you do it in conjunction with the survey, costs you about an additional $400, maybe $500. Don't let them quote you $1,000. Let them, you can find someone that will do it between $400 and $500, which is damn good insurance. In the event the insurance program changes in the near future, you'd want to know where your structure is. So people call me every day and say, I'm buying X in Timber Grove. Do you have an elevation certificate? If they have an elevation certificate, I can take that house and I can see its elevation, and I can go click on Walter P. Moore and see what the difference between the 100 and 500 year, and give them some level of confidence. If the 500-year base flood elevation for this particular house is 622 and they're at 627, I think they're going to be fine, unless I click on the little deal. North Main and Quitman, the difference of that corner is 6.5 feet. 6.5 feet. So if it was at 625 today in the 100, and I see that it's at 627, it doesn't mean crap if soon it's going to be 3 feet below the base flood elevation, and you got to build 2 feet above that. You're 5 feet underwater from what the building code is. So you've got to learn these scenarios. I just don't know how to make it clearer. If you didn't get anything, the main thing you need to do is get the 500-year base flood elevation on every survey and get an elevation certificate every time you possibly can. Because remember, on these elevations, and there are plenty of YouTube videos on the elevation certificates, so I don't really go, and there's classes on this, you know, Westbury, Willow Bend, Timber Grove, Oak Forest is slab on grade. The bottom of that slab is the same level as this grade right here, the dirt and the earth at the same level. The newer construction, 70s, 80s, 90s, we've got a slab on grade, so you got a little bit better there. Of course, we used to think of this as Galveston, but really, this is Meyer land. This is this house elevated to 10 feet and some enclosure down here. But to be clear, you cannot use any of this enclosure for habitable space. We do not want you to air condition it. We, the city of Houston, do not want you to convert that where your mom, who just had a hip replacement, is living there when the rain rises. We don't want your kid to sleep down there in a slumber party. They will die. Someone will die if that thing is not designed for water. It's got to be designed so that the water can slide through there. So you're constantly looking for this base flood elevation, and this is what it's designed to do. Guys, we are trying to hold water in your house. We are trying to hold water in every house. We have nowhere else to put the water except underneath your house. This is how it's designed to go. Hold the water where we can before it can get to the street, it's going to rise from the street, it's going to go into your house, it's going to sit there, and then it's going to recede, go into the street, go into the storm sewer system, go into the bayou, and get to the Gulf of Mexico. This is the new norm. This is called living with water. This is the only way we're going to be safe anymore in our county as we have the climate situation that we have. I don't know how to be any more clear about it. And I could talk on this forever, so I'm sure you're probably getting exhausted. There are good things. Even though there are soon to be changes outside of the floodplain, and the city has adopted some new standards and will continue to adopt new standards, we really are in a program really paying attention to a couple of things at the moment. And so here is the rule today. You have the crown of the street. Someplace you have a curb, you don't always have a curb, but you can always measure from the crown of the street, which is generally in the middle, and your foundation is 12 inches here above that. Soon those numbers are going to be risen. In the 100 and the 500 year floodplain, you can't have this fill. So when you can no longer bring any dirt there, you're only going to get this foundation, a pier and beam foundation in the 100 and 500. Soon you're going to see those levels. Right now you can still build a 12-inch slab outside the 100 and 500, but outside the floodplain, when we adopt new changes, and you can't do that, you're never going to get a slab house. You're only going to get a pier beam house. because I showed you we want to hold the water in your house there. That's not going to be rocket science. That's what we are holding the water there. And then the amount of coverage that you have over your lot, be very, very careful, because we're realistic. We're going to hold water in this area before it slopes down to the street. So we can't have 100% of it tied up to a house or a swimming pool or concrete. So these numbers shall be adjusted. I do not let my staff, I do not let my agents say room for a pool, because I'm nervous as hell. We sell a house that's room for a pool, and then the city doesn't let them build a pool because of the impervious changes. So they need to be prepared for additional changes to impervious cover in the very near future, as well as just general drainage requirements whatsoever. We do not, as the city, regulate very well. I mean, enforcement is shit, and I know that. If we enforce two things that has been directed to enforce, it's to keep this water, especially on new construction, on their property and drain to the street during the construction. A year ago, you would have bitched about the builder, and he said, oh, I have a drainage plan that was approved by the city. He didn't put it in until the end. And, you know, I have permanent plans. Their water can't flow onto abutting properties. They need to put their rot board or their fences up or do whatever drainage plan they have so that they can't drain onto this person. They need to drain to the street. And the people, anyone that are redoing the front into the city right of way, when you replace any driveway, anything that's there, anything that's new, fill in any ditch, no exceptions, don't know how to make clear there's no exceptions, you must go to the 24-inch culvert. If you replace your old driveway in Timber Grove, you're going to you can't just pour over what's there. You're going to get the chance to put a 24-inch drain. You want to put a parking spot in front of your house, you can do so. You're going to have to put a 24-inch drain. You fill in a ditch anyway, you got to pull down a drain. If you don't, they're going to go red tag you, they're going to fine you, and they're going to remove your water meter. So this is the only two areas they really have the most directive to go and enforce. These changes keep us eligible for flood insurance. 83% of the structures did not have flood insurance the day Harvey hit. 83. Every structure, in my opinion, needs flood insurance in the city of Houston and the county. We actually increased the participation in the flood insurance program the year after, and today I will tell you we have fewer structures today covered than we did the day Harvey hits. Listen to what I just said. Fewer structures today are covered than the day Harvey hit, because there are many structures that just were never rebuilt and they don't maintain the insurance on them. Our insurance rates are low, but they're not always going to be this low. So lots of things going on. Now, this is an example. I want to end on some positive notes. The city, the county, flood control district, TxDOT, everyone is working very hard to solve this problem. It is a comprehensive set of problems that need a comprehensive approach to solution. We are looking at every square inch of any publicly owned property, by a hospital district, by a school, university, a park, dog park, anywhere that we could find any bit of grass. This is an example of just one little area. There's hundreds of these areas where we're looking at every opportunity that we have to have additional drainage and detention. So if it's owned by the city of Houston, Harris County Flood Control District, anyone, it doesn't matter. We're looking at them extensively. There's a group of people that constantly do this, that are looking at projects. Before Harvey hit, after tax day and after Memorial Day, we were working on some substantial projects. These projects were already in the works, and they're easier to do because they're long-term projects that a lot of work had been applied to. Here are a dozen or so regional issues that the city felt like if they spent some money, they could adequately impact drainage in the adjoining areas. The reality of it is we needed the money from Harvey, the money from the state, the money from the feds in order to do some of these projects. A number of these projects are very far along and will make a significant difference. We will need more money. We do not have enough money to do all of these projects, but we're in the process of many of them. You might have heard about the Inwood Forest. This is an old golf course. We bought the golf course. We're going to do drainage and detention and retention projects here, much like Terry Hershey Park and the areas over there. This is a $48 million project. We have the $48 million. It's in our bank account. This project will take place. When you get this federal money, the best thing about it is that there's a deadline. You must spend the money in 3 years or you have to give the money back. So we're very, very, very motivated to do this project. And we're working collaboratively, the city, the adjacent cities, Harris County Flood Control, Harris County, the Commissioner's Court, everyone, to help this region here. When you help this region, you're helping these other regions down here. This is Lake Houston. Lake Houston, remember, we own the majority of the water in Lake Conroe and Lake Houston. City of Houston is the primary owner of that water. That water flows from Conroe to Lake Houston, from Lake Houston down into the Gulf of Mexico. We have old antiquated systems used to regulate the water, which caused the water to rise too rapidly, which meant you had to release water, which meant you flooded part of Kingwood. We had known of this problem for an extended period of time. We need additional dams and updated dams and larger dams. Today, on basis, you can go to the Sanderson watershed, you can sign up for these updates or whatever. In theory, this lake we used to keep at about 30 feet high. Today, we lower the lake, especially in the rainy season, down to 24, 26 feet. Of course, the people with the boat dock in Kingwood and Lake Houston bitch every day that we've sacrificed their quality of life for a few people in homes up in the floodway, and it's a constant battle over here. And we tried our best to allow as much water as possible into Conroe and Lake Houston. But when we see a storm somewhere today in Austin or San Antonio, we immediately just manually, just someone's direction, goes over there and releases some water in order so that we can hold more water in the bathtub as it fills up. It's really not a very good system. We know it's not a very good system. It's just the best one we have. This $48 million, which was allocated, will add additional dams, will add additional capacity, will update the dams that were there, will make it a more scientific approach, will allow for more water to be held in Conroe and Lake Houston, and will be a significant factor of this area up in Kingwood. We have this money, we're spending this money, this project will take place. It is happening. It will definitely help this region right over here. This is the largest project that we have going on. This is called the North and South Canal. This is on the, here is the Heights area down here. This is White Oak Bayou. We cross downtown and we get to the area where Theodore Rex, the Last Concert Cafe, this little section on I-10 before you get to what is basically 59 coming over here. This is a project that has been on the books for 30 years. Okay, for 30 years, we've known we had a problem and they never had the money or the will to go and fix it. There are two projects, the North and South Canal. So here's the new North Canal. This is where Metro stores buses here. We're gonna move this bus up to, it's a shit storage place anyway. Go put it up here adjacent to the new interstate, recreate a section in the North Canal, recreate a new South Canal detention basin over here. This is a $163 million project. It is designed to hold water, but also be a new recreational facility area. This is part of the extension of Buffalo Bayou Park as it gets to the East End and the greater East End before it gets to the Port of Houston. It's a significant project with unprecedented collaboration. City of Houston, TxDOT, Harris County Flood Control, Harris County management districts, all working collaboratively to do this project, which has the potential to get 100,000 houses out of harm's way as far back as Memorial. In addition to just how large this project works, we just redid this Yale Bridge right here. It's a brand new bridge, and this is the Heights Bridge here. These bridges will be torn down and will be rebuilt. Today, the way it works, the reality is, the water comes from Memorial and it hits these bridges and it stops there and it backflows and it causes flooding as far back as Memorial Mall. These bridges will be rebuilt higher. The bridges at 11th Street and TC Jester, the bridges at 18th Street and TC Jester, all tied to the North Canal, which will get City Hall out of harm's way. Right now, I mentioned before, it's 6.5 feet below the base flood elevation. The dam tunnel system in City Hall and the parking garages flood all the time, costing the city hundreds of millions of dollars every major flood. It's insane to keep putting it back the way it was. You've got to do something different, which was the reason we rerouted the money from FEMA over to HUD to try and do these projects. So that's a significant project that I think will help a large areas. There are a number of these projects. These are just the beginning. These are some that were further along than others. We must continue down this project. We must continue to have this collaboration. But really, what you need to know is to go be able to find the 500-year base flood elevation, the 500 and the 100. You can't find it easily outside the 100 500, so that's why you need the surveyor to go find that for you. And then understand the difference of how these maps are going to change over time, as is the flood insurance program changing over time. And then of course the rules and regulations, they change all the time, and they're a little different in Bel Air, a little different in Westview, a little different in the city than they are in the county. It's very confusing. I understand that it's very confusing. There are a number of really smart people who are trying to get people as educated as quickly as we can. I have another 3-hour great class that helps you on permitting and platting and some of these deals. If you haven't had this class, think about taking this class too. We only cover flooding for about 20-25 minutes in this deal, because I try and route people back over to my other CE class on Houston and flooding. So that's it in a nutshell. How about some questions? Time for a couple of questions?
We do have someone asking if will the last concert cafe be impacted on that construction?
Nope. That's good. No. And last concert cafe will not be impacted. We're using existing Harris County flood control land, or what is land owned by a governmental entity, either TxDOT or Metro already owned enough of the land for us to increase this capacity. So none of those businesses where that little arts are impacted by the north or south canal. I'm not saying there's no business today impacted by I-45 in segment 2, but I will be honest, I serve on that committee also. There's still a lot of work trying to mitigate any of the loss of businesses in those areas, but no impact to Last Concert Cafe or Theodore Rex or what used to be whatever that was before that. It's not Theodore Rex anymore. What is it again? Something else. Any other questions?
There's a lot of people saying that this was great information, but was a lot of information, and they would like to know if this will be available. And yes, it will be available on our YouTube channel, HAR TV, in I believe a week from now. So.
And the minute we can have more classes, I mean, just look on HAR or, send me an email ever so often. I do think it's easier in person. I think it's a little more interactive. There are typically way more questions about an example of substantial damage. We could pull up houses. I mean, any house that I see that says recently remodeled, I go and check the permit. And in reality, very few houses got a permit, and I recognize that, but I do think in the future it's going to be a huge impact, and it's gonna hurt some people. So I do encourage you to email me some questions, come to one of the other classes. I'll continue to update. I study this every day. I study some segment of this from the federal, state, or local level.
Perfect. And I do have another question coming, and it says, how can you check to see how much of a remodel home's budget has been used before buying it?
You can go to, you would go check the HCAD version of the deal, and then go pull the permits at the City of Houston permitting site to get a feel if they had the permits and what portion did they permit. I understand the question is, if it was that $100,000 house, how much of the $50,000 have they used up already, is a very complicated question at the moment. And there's not an easy answer other than emailing the permitting office, which is not going to be responsive during the middle of a pandemic or anything. It's a little harder. If you'll send me that question via email to bill@yourbld.com, I will send you to a website. If the work was done in the last 3 years, it's a relative is a relative term, probably find the information in a couple of days. If the work was done greater than 3 years ago, it takes longer from that to get into the system. But they have improved the system since September 1 to make it easier, especially for that point forward. Now, remember, the Harvey work was done prior to that time. So much of that work, the 149,000 houses, didn't even get a permit. So the substantial damage, substantial improvement is from that point forward, from September 1, which really impacts the improved values that would start into 2019. it's a little confusing how it works.
And then
But
someone
just
is
so you know,
asking, what is the HAR form number?
303 is the form number, and it's in this package here, but it's form 303. I'm pretty clear because I use it a bunch. It is this form right here, but it's form 303. Form 303, Notice of Regulations for Construction in a Floodplain. But I would do this in every, not just the 100 or 500 year floodplain, because plenty of people are going to be in a floodplain that aren't in the floodplain today. So we use this for every buyer signs this. We don't enter into any contract that they don't sign this. Good question.
Perfect. And then last one, what happened to the 149K houses?
They were allowed to remodel and people moved right back into them. And many of them, there is a significant problem with a number of those. If those houses, this can get very complicated, and I'm just going to explain the way it works. If one of those houses was in the 100-year floodplain, and if anyone pulled federal money from the flood insurance program and took the money, and then they sold it to a flipper, and a flipper fixed it up and they sold it, FEMA is going back today into the 100-year floodplain of the houses that received money. A condition of that money was that the houses get pulled out of the floodplain. And I know of hundreds of examples of houses where people now, unbeknownst, bought a house that was remodeled in the 100-year floodplain, and FEMA is notifying them that they have a new lien on their house and have to somehow mitigate the situation that they took federal money, and part of the condition of the money was to raise the house. Now think about what I'm saying, because lots of people are going to get hit here. The family who lived there forever got $250,000 worth of flood insurance money, but didn't do anything except sell the house to John Smith, who fixed it up and sold it to Mary Jones. Mary Jones is living in the house, and now she's getting a notice from FEMA that they have a $250,000 lien on that house and are requiring the homeowner today, who lives there today, to raise the house out of harm's way because federal fraud was involved in taking federal money, but none of the money was used to raise the house. You can't take the federal money and sell to some flipper and not raise the house. The house has to get out of harm's way. Now, whoever was required to raise the house, whether that was the flipper who didn't really get a permit, I assure you the flipper didn't get the permit. Someone's going to be suing a lot of people, and someone's going to be hurt financially. It's a federal problem that we have going on in a number of these houses. Many of those houses, when you go and look at the 149,000, only the 28,000 or 30,000 were in the 100-year floodplain. But substantial damage and substantial improvement did not apply until after September 1. So there's no City of Houston true problem today. Now, there are plenty of people that remodel a house without a permit and the city catches them later, and you can be red tagged at any moment. And you're supposed, in my city class, I explained this thoroughly, you should have that owner, whoever's there, go and get an as-built permit where the city will come inspect it. And they will come and not be punitive. They will go and see, is the work adequately done in a manner that was professional? They're not gonna rip out the tile from the deal. But we had one the other day where they pulled the shower trim, and behind the tile was no moisture barrier. All of the master bathroom had been done with no moisture barrier, and so the mold was growing behind the tile because there wasn't wet board where it was supposed to be, and nobody had gotten a permit, nobody had inspected the shower pan or any of that sort of thing. So it is today catching many of these people when they go to sell the house. They check a box on the seller's disclosure, did you get a permit or not? Most people don't get a permit, but if you check, you didn't get a permit. The first thing I do when I see a house that says recently remodeled is I check the permits and see if they got a permit. And if they don't, then I go and check the seller's disclosure and see what box they checked. And if I get them under contract and they lied that they did get a permit for everything and they didn't, they're in already default. They have defaulted in their contractual obligation. And so I want to hold them accountable to go get the permits that are necessary to make sure that it's a safe house in which to live in. That's all that really people want to know. So that's, I mean, that's really the status. I do thoroughly explain that in my other class. It gets very confusing how that works. You know, I'm trying to explain insurance programs and flood risk, but there's certainly a risk to people who bought a house that was not permitted and now is totally remodeled. There's some risk.
There's a lot of information, but that's all the questions I have right now. Thank you so much, Bill, for all of this. Even I learned so much.
Thank you. We'll do it again.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you, everybody that joined us today.
Bye-bye.